Hello, welcome to the guest show. This week I'm very honoured to have somebody I've known for many years, and we discovered another connection as well between us. I can never say your last name, Errol.
McGlashan.
McGlashan, yeah, you foreigners all the same. Um, I know Errol through Cardboard Citizens, that's how I met him. And I was a stand-up comedian, an actor, and I think I'm very, very good in those areas. Errol is a great actor. But where he beats me down into one form I cannot write, and I have a blog in it. That's the spoken word. In 2019, he won Spoken Word Artist of the Year,
Mhm.
which is amazing. So thank you for coming, Errol.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks for asking me.
So why don't you tell us something about your story? You know, how you came into the form of poetry to begin with.
I got into poetry very late, you know. I've only since been writing to perform since 2011, and it first started, and I've often told this story. I slipped into Brixton Ritzy, upstairs at the Ritzy. I was just about to unlock my bike and go home. I saw these group of people going into upstairs in the Ritzy, so I didn't unlock the bike. I thought,
What is
oh,
the
I wonder what's
Ritzy? Sorry, what
the,
is
the
the
Ritzy is the picture house in Brixton
Oh,
next
like
to
the
the
rock.
library.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I followed this group of people in. The security thought I was with them, so they didn't challenge me, and I just sat down, waiting for someone to come up and say, "Mate, you got a ticket," but no one did. And it was a spoken word night, and there was a poet called Mr. G, and he got up there, he done a poem about hoodies, and I thought, I can do that. So I went home and I wrote a poem that evening called Thank Fuck It's Monday. And then I was just going to open mic nights. It's the reason I'm not on Facebook anymore, but it was the reason I joined Facebook. I joined Facebook just so that I could find open mic nights to perform my one poem. And I used to try and get out every night of the week. So and then I added another poem, and then very quickly I made a name for myself because I think I'm quite energetic and quite charismatic on the stage, you know. So yeah. So
I'm
yes.
glad you
So
agree with that. You're I do my stand-up. I have a character I play,
mhm,
and it's not. But you, when you do your poetry, there's so much energy there.
yeah.
It blows me. Mark. It blows
Mhm.
my mind the first time I saw it, and every time I watch you, it's the same thing. Where'd you get all this energy from?
Yeah, so well, I'm slowing down. I just literally turned 60 the other day. On 29th of December, I turned 60. You know what I mean? I was slowing down, but yes, you know, the thing about the energy is that, you know what I mean, there's good and bad to it, isn't it? So, you know, you have to contain it. Lots of time it's my energy in the past that has got me into loads of trouble, you know what I mean, running my mouth off and all the rest
Mm.
of it. But it's quite good for performance. I wouldn't even say it's good for rehearsal. It's not good for rehearsal rooms and all the rest of it. People get fed up. But on the stage, having energy on the stage is good for performance, and it keeps the audience, you know, it's good for audience engagement. It keeps them on you.
Heard some of your poems. I'm wondering, when I did my stand-up piece,
Mhm.
it was usually I wanted to get some idea through, some viewpoint I had.
Mhm.
Is that the same thing with you, your poems, or you just
You know, my main thing, and this is the thing when people say why they do stuff or the purpose of theatre or the purpose of poetry and that. My main thing, number one, is I want to entertain. Now, of course, you know what I mean, some of my views and my way of looking at the world is going to come through. And in fact, I do think that if your way of looking at the, you know, like my way of looking at the world often rubs up against other people's way of looking at the world to the extent, like we were talking a bit earlier, and you say, oh, you try and avoid talking about war and that because it's emotive.
hmm.
And I find the same thing with certain views that I have about the world and that people can get very emotional. I mean, they get emotional just because you're expressing something they don't believe themselves, and they can go a bit mental. You know what I mean? Um, but if you can, I don't know. put it in a piece of art, put it in some spoken word, I know, bung a few rhymes on it and all the rest of it, then people can hear it better. Then they can argue with it. You know what I mean? So you give your thing, then they can say whatever. What I've got to avoid in my old age is having these conversations with people where, you know what I mean, it turns into a knockdown, drag out battle, you know what I mean? Because people's egos get involved, and then, you know what I mean, rather than dealing with the content of your argument, they'll make comments about your character or your mental health, or they'll do some psychological kind of diagnosis of your mental state because you believe what you believe, rather than just dealing with the actual belief. So yes, but
Yeah,
yes.
you just reminded me years ago. Okay, I got involved with something called the Actors Institute. Doesn't exist anymore. Came from America. They do a weekend. For that weekend, you're supposed to perform a piece.
Yeah.
Something incredible. We had one guy there from the Royal Opera, Royal Ballet, who did a dance. I'd never seen ballet until then. Another person was, I remember this viola player, and the workshop leader would get us keep us stamping our foot at every certain note. I wrote. It's actually one of the first pieces I've ever written solo. Before then, I'd always written, sketches.
Yeah.
And I remember you get critiques. I got 32 critiques. That was everybody in the group. 26 were saying how wonderful I was. 5 were saying, how can you dress that way? Because as you know, I'm satirically elegant. And one person said, I love you, which happened, she ended up being my girlfriend. And what I did with the 5 that didn't, that were commenting on me, I chucked them. I kept the others.
Mm.
It's how you listen to things, isn't it? When you get feedback.
Oh yeah, so the thing about feedback, this is the thing as well. You know, we've got to remember, and this is what people forget, and I have to constantly remind myself, right? Feedback, a lot of the time, is just people's opinions. Even when they are giving you so-called professional advice on something you've written or your performance and that, even then, a lot of the time, it's about their personal preference. And you take it on board and you either agree or don't agree. However, I don't think that anybody should change if they are comfortable with what they're doing, and then someone else says, oh, are you sure you want to say that or want to do this and want to do that? I don't think they should change it for that reason. I think someone should only change their stuff when they've tested it out and they constantly getting. So, for instance, you've got a gag in your script or whatever, and when you do it, it's not landing. When you do it, it's not landing. When you do it, it's not landing. You just think, how come they never laugh at that? You know what I mean? That type of thing. That's when you sort of look at it. You know what I mean? But just, don't get me wrong. I want other people to comment. I want their feedback. You know, a lot of the time people are liars. People, you know what I mean, they're scared. They don't want to. They sometimes people will not say what they really think, or what they think something. So for instance, they're not feeling it, they don't like it. Rather than saying that, they go around the houses, and it's only after they've been finishing talking for 5 minutes you start to realize, oh, I don't think they like it, but they're just not saying, you know what I mean? So what I do, there's been times when I've performed and I say to people, okay, question and answers, but how, or I'm interested in your feedback. There's a bit of paper and a pen, write it down. I don't need your names. You know what I mean? And then people will be truthful. They'll be more truthful when they write something down, and then you can look at it later than standing up and saying something there and then in front of everyone. You know, and the English audience are polite. You know what I mean? You can get on the
Yeah,
stage and fart in with them and they will applaud you.
I know. I have.
Yeah, so you can't take as gospel even what the bloody audience do. So yeah.
Because what I know for me, when I do it, when I went around the circuit doing sets,
Mm.
I'd get usually, yeah, you're fantastic, you're brilliant, you're funny. And I go home and think I could have done that better.
But 1 second, Ian, because the dog's just got up and I don't want her to
Certainly.
sit on the puppies.
Errol's dog has just given birth to 12 puppies, he was telling me.
Please,
You know,
Teresa,
and he used to be it, but he's amazing fellow.
Teresa, can you come, please? Can you deal with her? Because she stood up. Yeah, sorry about that, because we've got
Okay.
12 puppies nursing on her, but
Just
sometimes
told
she
them.
stands up, and when she stands up, I'm worried that she's going to sit on them.
Yeah. So I was saying, to repeat my question, it's like when I used to do the sets, I come home, even though I get brilliant feedback in some way, and actually people come up to me and say it's good, I'd always think I could do better.
Oh yeah, I always think that.
It must be the performance side, we all want to be perfection.
Because it can always be better. Most things there's room for improvement.
Is that ever in the lines, or is it just in the performance?
It's in both. There's always room for improvement in the writing. There's always room for improvement in you know what I mean, in the writing and in the performance. I realize that from my one man show, and you know what I mean. You can tinker with a bit of text forever.
Mm,
I mean, I can't remember who the poet was, but some famous poet said, "Listen, poems are never finished; they're just abandoned." In other words, you just think, listen, it's going to have to do because you can constantly change it. And even my script, So as you know, when I won the Poetry Awards for Best Spoken Word Artist, that was in 2019. And then 3 months later, literally, the whole world got locked down because of COVID. So I wasn't
mm.
performing. I've done a few Zoom performances, but it's not the same. You know what I mean? Like, I need the front row to feel my saliva. And this was not happening. And there was a delay in the clap. And I just wasn't feeling the Zoom performances. So I stopped doing them. But I had a little story that I'd written about a guy who, was pretty straight. He went into prison and came out a heroin addict. So I had this little story, and I'd read it out at the Blackfriars Settlement. I was doing a writing workshop at the Blackfriars Settlement.
Mm.
Um, it was run by this guy, um, Confucius MC. He's a rapper and he's also a teacher. And when I read it out, he says, "Oh, I can imagine that as a one-man show, but only I can't imagine anyone else performing it but you." And that was all I needed. So during lockdown, I thought, you know what? I'm going to turn this, which was a little 400-word story. I thought, I'm going to turn this into a one-man show. So I just every day I was just writing it, writing it, writing it. And of course, my version was about 40 hours long, so I had to cut it right down, what they call kill your babies, you know what I mean? I had some brilliant scenes in there, but I just thought I have to get rid of them, you know what I mean? Because, people's attention span, you cannot, you know what I mean? You cannot, I don't think one person can do they have to be brilliant. There's going to have to be so much in there to do a 2 hour show.
Well,
A
even
one-man show, which is 2 hours long. I think it's way too long. 60 minutes is most people's.
there's a famous director, Ken something or other, I can't remember his name. He's done something called The Warp,
Mm,
which was a 24-hour play.
mm.
And
Yeah.
what
Oh
they want,
yes, yes. Is that the one where there's a woman
I
and
don't know what the story is. All I know
uh,
is this. We were
was
discussing
it at the Young
it.
Vic?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I know it. I know what you're
And
talking about. I know a few people who's on it.
we were going to do a proscenium. Me and this guy ran the theatre company. This is years ago.
Mm,
And we were thinking of using it as a basis to go around several theatres on the journey for like 24 hours.
mm,
And we even went to the Hackney Empire. We're speaking to them about it, and they were interested. But
mhm.
we couldn't get it together, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, it is difficult because I always remember I came to your word on the curb. And I thought,
Yes, I remember. Was that outside? That was
yeah,
outside the
outside the
Whitney.
library.
Yeah, outside the
And
library.
you
Yeah,
said to me, no longer than 3 minutes.
yeah,
My sets are based, the shortest one is 10 minutes,
yeah.
and it is the problem of length, always, any material, performance material.
And especially for the stuff on Word on the Curb, because a lot of the time that was just onlookers and passerbys.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Sometimes I used to stand there for a good 20 minutes by myself and nobody stopped. No one would do anything. You know what I mean? It can be a bit soul destroying. But when people did stop and then I'd open it up and I say, listen, I know some of you've got something you've written recently on your phone or in a little notebook. And I used to always be pleasantly surprised by the amount of people who'd come up and say, actually, I have got a little poem and then read it off their phone. You know what I mean? But, you can't have people doing 20-minute sticks and all the rest of it. And I used to just encourage people, you know what I mean? Just cut it down a bit, you know what I mean? So
it's
that
okay,
the
Errol. I'm not
attention
talking
span.
to you ever again for that.
Yeah.
Um, but it
Mhm,
is about this material thing, how you write a play.
mhm,
We both write plays.
mhm.
I'm not as disciplined as you.
I wouldn't say I'm disciplined at all, you know what I mean? I slog and I get it out, you know what I mean? I have to use an app to help me focus.
Really?
I use something called Focus Mate.
What's that do?
What it does is like it's a bit like a Zoom thing where you know what I mean you book either 25 minutes, 50 minutes, or 75 minutes. It's called Focus Mate. You pay something like $4 a month, and then they give you someone from the English speaking world, anywhere in the country, as long as they speak English. So you've got them, and it's just like on the Zoom thing, just like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you talk for 30 seconds to a minute about what you're going to do. So I will say, well, I'm going to learn 3 pages. In the next 50 minutes, I'm going to familiarize myself with 3 pages of my one-man show. And they'll say, oh, I've got to mark some papers, iron some clothes, meditate, you know what I mean, do some coding, whatever it is. Then we say, okay, cool. Then we both mute our mics. I usually just put them in the corner of the screen so they can see me. Usually I've got a lectern, so I'm to the side. They can see me and I can see them. This means that you stay on task. It's what do you call it? Not a responsibility, an accountability app. You've said to this person, right, for the next 50 minutes, I'm going to focus on these 3 pages and learn it. They said what they're going to do. So because you've said it, it's committed. Then they are there on the screen. So if you are typing, they're just there on the corner of the screen. They're doing their thing, you're doing your thing. You're not all of a sudden going to think, oh, fuck it, I'm going to go down the pub, or you're just going to leave that person hanging. Oh, yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to watch some YouTube and that. You know what I mean? Because you want to do this thing, plus that person's relying on you to do your
Mm.
thing, so they keep doing their thing. And that's how I learned the whole script, you know what I mean? And we're talking, my script is like 50 odd pages long, and I memorized the whole thing using that. So I do have to use I do have a problem with focusing in. I hate using excuse, but I have got adult ADHD in that, and so is everyone else, it seems, you know what I mean?
Well,
But
for me,
I find it very hard to focus. But in order to get good at anything, or in order to complete anything, in order to fucking, you know what I mean, get stuff down and be productive, you have to focus. You have to be able to focus on stuff, otherwise nothing gets finished. And
wait,
my
I had
life.
it yesterday with the newsletter.
Mm,
Because also what I do is, and I've got to stop doing this, is when I started, I had most of the people's recordings already. I actually didn't even work out a program until 6 weeks into it. So
mhm,
6 weeks went out. I just chose people
mm,
randomly.
yeah.
But with the newsletter, so yesterday, for example, is making sure it's a clear cut copy, the music I have aside for the podcast. Then I spent 3 hours typing up this newsletter.
Mm,
I'm not a fast typist, probably about 40 words a minute, which isn't bad, I suppose.
mm,
And I use, for magazines, you've got styles. I've used the casual style, if you notice. I do a talking style with that one.
yeah.
For the pavement, totally different style. For other magazines I've written for it, different style. But
Mhm,
I've got a bad habit of doing things at the last minute.
yeah. I think it's one of the banes of the human race is that it seems that everyone seems to, lots of people seem to have a problem with just getting on and knuckling down and getting on to do stuff. You know what I mean? We'll spend ages talking about what we got to do and how we feel about it, rather than just getting on and doing it. You know what I mean? And if ever I talk to young people now, when they start talking to me or they say anything about what they want to do, I say, whoa, 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 stop talking. get on and do it. I say, write down the thing that it is that you want to do. You know what I mean? Put together your little elevator pitch. You know what I mean? Put it together so that you can just tell me that in 20 seconds. You know what I mean? Because then you are working on the idea rather than just waffling around it and it going round and round in your head. And there's ideas that I've had which I've been talking about for 40 years and I haven't realised them. I just talk about them. You know what I mean? You can end up talking about stuff and then just not getting on with it because you're just so busy talking about it. You know what I
Yeah, I've
mean?
got a television series I've been working on for years.
Yeah.
I've got the idea. For me, and like my approach to writing a script is I get the idea.
Mm.
Then I get a title because I love titles. I think they really
Mm.
give you a good hook.
Yeah.
Then, before I put any word, I think of 4 plot points.
Mm.
If you're intervention points from the forum, plot points that are important in that story, then I write. And then the characters take over.
Mm.
Now, for you, I've seen your show.
Mm-hmm.
As I will say openly, I was brilliant. It's what I expected out of you. The energy of performance, but also, how can I put it? The directness to the audience that you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
in that show.
Yeah, I want it to be natural. I want it to be just some,
Mm.
bloke talking about his experience. Yes, it's got to be entertaining and that, but he's talking about an experience. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I'll talk a bit about my show.
Please do.
My show is called Something to Take Off the Edge. It's kind of like a slightly rephrased Shakespeare term, and basically, it's about two guys, Terry and Ezra, cellmates, and their flirtations with heroin, chocolate hobnobs, and Shakespeare as they serve long-term prison sentences back in the 80s. There's certain themes, of course. So there's literacy, that's one of the themes, mental health, drug addiction, friendship, you know what I mean? Despair. These are little things that I talk about in there, but also copious amounts of Shakespeare sonnets and that, because in the 80s, you could not, you know what I mean? You couldn't do Bird without someone coming in, shoving Shakespeare at you to try and rehabilitate you. And it's, using Shakespeare as a rehabilitation tool is a big thing, you know what I mean? Australia, America, over here, there are companies, and what they do is they use Shakespeare and the Shakespeare plays, whether they're performing them, whether they're workshopping them, whether they're just having a reading and recital, and there's something about that, you know what I mean? So, yeah, some of it stuck with me, and yeah, so
So,
I
yeah,
thought,
so I know you, what the audience might not know, you were inside.
yeah,
And also, it's funny enough, we were talking, there's another connection between us, Chris Johnson.
yes, so yes, this is back in the day, I've always, you know what I mean? So Chris died all of
Mm.
a sudden, you know what I mean? Really fast onset of cancer. Um, Yes, so back in the day, I think it was was it Inside Edge? It wasn't Inside Edge.
Inside Arts.
Out Inside Arts. Yes. So yes, this was ages ago. It's where I met the mother to my child Valentine, and yeah, in Camden every
Yeah,
week.
because
We
it
used
must have
to
been
love.
after I left.
It must have been just after you left because I
Yeah.
definitely didn't meet you there. But it was, yeah, every week we used to go there and we used to do drama. We used to
Yeah, because
improvise.
Chris got me in.
Mm.
I think so. The audience to know, I was an actor at the time. I
Mhm.
went to this workshop. You got to practice your art at the
Mm.
Roundhouse, and Chris, not the Roundhouse, Oval House, and Chris turned around and said, "Are you an actor?" And I said, "Yes. Would you like to devise a play with me?" So about a year and a half, because there was three of us, and I always had different projects on.
Mm.
We managed to get a play together. We performed the Hen and Chickens, but he asked me one day, would I like to help him out at the probation service? So like I would usually come along and support him, or maybe I he said, "Tell me act like this, Ian, show him how it is," and I'd do it.
Mm.
But it was I learned such a lot from working in that group.
Yeah, there's a few people I know, do you know Richmond True?
No,
Okay, so
maybe
there's a
by sight, but
yeah,
no,
yeah, you
that
probably
doesn't
know him
name
by
me.
face, but he was, you know what I mean, he was one of Chris's mentees. And there's few people I know who name Chris as their mentor.
Tony Seeley.
Yeah,
That's
Tony
I
Seeley's
heard of
one of
it.
them. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and it's funny what small world it is.
There's a book. In fact, I've got a book. It's probably on my shelf over there. I'm not going to go over there, but I've got a book written by Chris Johnson, and it's called Games and Activities for Those Who Like to Say No.
Yeah,
So you know, sometimes, and I've had
I
this
mean, he was writing at the
where,
time when I knew him.
yeah, oh right, when I was, when I'm running workshops, when I'm doing whatever, yeah, and sometimes you get a group of people and they're just not cooperating. They just don't want to do nothing. They just literally don't want to do nothing. So I used to go into um, ISIS prison, a Young Offenders Institute. It's a
Mm.
HMP and a Young Offenders Institute. It took me 2 years to pass the security because of my criminal record and all the rest of it. Now, I go into prisons for one-offs, and that's fine. You know what I mean? You can slip through security there. You usually go through the library or through education. But if you're doing a consistent thing where you're doing it weekly or every other week and all the rest of it, then you need to pass a different type of vetting because you're going in there regular. So it took them ages to let me in. And I was helping to run the peace course, a peace education program. And I found it so, so destroying. You know what I mean? I'd get up early, plan the lesson and that. I'd get in there, and then you get this group of guys. And this does not happen to me. Usually if I go somewhere, even if it's a difficult group, I can usually engage them in one way or another. You
Mm.
know what I mean, this lot seemed determined not to do anything, not to do anything. So, you try and get a discussion going, you try and get in this, and they would just act bloody stupid, you know what I mean? Juvenile. And I just thought, okay, number one, if I was lead tutor, I felt I could have handled it better, but I wasn't, you know what I mean? There was someone else leading it, and there was four of us who used to go in, you know what I mean? Chipping in, chipping in. So when I'd be doing something, they'd be interrupting. And I think, if you interrupt me, how can I get it going? How can I get the activity going if one of my own, you know what I mean, people I'm meant to be delivering the course with, bloody want to contradict me in that? So I had to stop going. But this book has really helped me in situations when I'm planning a session and I just flip through it and I just think, all right, let me use that activity. Let me use that activity, you know? So, yeah.
Well, I know Chris was. He introduced me to sagaloo.
To who?
It's an Indian dish.
Okay.
Chris was a vegetarian, if you don't know that.
No, I can't remember that now.
And he lived around the corner to me.
Mm.
He asked me to come around to discuss the play, certain parts of the play. Wally,
Mhm.
the other actor, was busy performing somewhere else that week. And we wanted to look at certain scenes to
Mhm.
make my cat. And he bought me Sagaloo that evening. He was an intellectual,
Yeah.
and he's always interested in the power of things.
Yeah, yeah. And, he was community and he used to like working with sort of, um, certain groups who were kind of outside that do
Yeah,
some
yeah. Well,
groups and that. Yeah.
we used to go to the world. I don't know if it did in your day, but in my day, we went to at the end of the workshop. We go to the World's End and have a drink.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we used to do
Yeah,
that. Mm.
but your
Right.
play. Let's
Yeah.
go to back to your.
Yes. So
I've slid.
yeah, yeah, you slid off. Yes, so something to take off the edge. It's an hour long, and then I just wanted places to perform it because you've written it. I've memorized the whole thing. I've had various people here and there, maybe two or three, you know me, give me little bits like Chris Sonics from Cardboard Citizens. He
Mm,
found out that I had this place. So he goes, "Oh, come in, you know what I mean? Give it a read through. Let me give you some feedback." So
that's
he's
why I
done
saw
that
it.
twice. So even though I've never had a director or producer or dramaturg or anything like that, I've had two, three, four people give me pointers, you know what I mean? So I've spent a bit of time with them and they've given me pointers on what I can do in that. Um, but yes, I needed to get it up on its feet, you know what I mean? So I started just going to the odd scratch night and performing 10 minutes of it. So, and you know what I mean? I got in contact with so many places. So there's one called Verbal Discharge, where basically it's just a group of writers They are, starting a book, finishing a book, in the middle of a book, or be
Mm.
writing a book for 10 years, and they stand up and they read an extract of it. Then the next person, there's no feedback or anything. You can feedback if you want during the break, but there's no formal feedback. And I thought, right, I'm going to use this place to do 10-minute extracts, but I wasn't reading. I would memorize the 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because remember, I wanted to use it for performance. So I was doing it there. I was doing it at the Cockpit Theatre. They've got a thing called um, theatre in the pound, where you pay a pound, the audience pays a pound, and then you perform 10 minutes of your show and you get feedback. And various places. So there's quite a few of them, half a dozen places or so, where I would just go and I would just perform. I even joined a group, Advanced Creative Writing at Morley's College. And it's the same thing, people, but this was a feedback thing. So people would read 10 minutes of their thing, and then the whole group would give them verbal feedback and write some stuff down, which I found very helpful. And then it got to the stage where I thought, right, I'm ready to perform this whole thing. So, yeah, anyway, since then, cut a long story short, I've performed it over 30 times, including 23 times for the Camden Fringe. So, during the month of August, I joined the Camden Fringe. So they've got various theatres all over the borough of Camden, and I don't know if you know. So anyway, so I started performing it, and now so it got chosen by the Royal Shakespeare Company, and also the Delhi Theatre. So I got invited to go up to Sheffield to perform it. So I performed it at theatres, community settings, and all over the place. But what I want to do now, Ian, is take it on a hostel tour. I'm talking bail hostels, probation hostel, drug and alcohol units, drop-in centres, homeless units, community centres, whatever, Salvation Army, St. Mungo's, you know what I mean? So I'm contacting these organisations, and what I want to do is get agreements in principle and then apply for funding, you know what I mean? And I just want to deliver the show, you know what I mean?
I
Do
think
it
as
free of
we've
charge
spoken
and
about
just do.
this
Yeah.
before,
Mm.
and I've introduced you to Matt,
Yes, and he's responded.
and there's no cost to anybody interested in Errol coming performing his show there, get him.
Yeah. Get me
Because
anyone interested, you can just get hold of me. Yeah,
I'll put your email in
yeah, put
the
my email. My email is word on the curb UK, curb spelled KERB. Word on the curb UK, and you can get hold of me, and I can come to your charity, to your organization, to your hostel, to your place of work, and I can perform this show for you. And all I would need from you beforehand is an agreement in principle that you want me to do it. You know what I
okay.
mean?
And I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it's the standard I expect Errol to perform at,
Yeah.
but also the story is engaging.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Errol can perform high energy, and well, there's a famous story of Gilgood. All right, he was performing, I think, at one of the big theatres in the West End,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, in the middle of it, he stops. He turns around to the audience and says, "Terribly, terribly sorry, my dears. We've forgotten two pages of text. We should now go back to it." And he walks backwards to the spot to start again. That is courage for an actor. Because in my day, if you've got a line, you just carried on.
We just carry on, yeah.
Yeah. But Errol is brilliant. So unfortunately, it comes to the end.
Oh, we've come to the end. Okay. I just want to, there's something that you said, and I just want to say something about that because you said that, oh, you want to talk, to do with goals and all the rest of it. Let me tell
Mm.
you, like when I was young, I never knew what I wanted to do. If anyone asked me, I'd never know. Every now and then I say, oh, I think I want to be a journalist, but I was never sure. And let me tell you, when you don't know what you want to do, you will get to your 40s and still not bloody know. You know what I mean? What I say is, choose something and get on with it. Choose something. Just choose one of the options that there is for you to do in your life. Start aiming for it, because as you aiming for it, that's when you decide, oh, do I really want this? Do I want something else? And you know what I mean? You create it as you go along. But you get your mind in the habit of going for a goal, going for something. It doesn't matter what the goal is as long as you aim for it. You know what I mean? And now me in my 60s, I'm starting to do that. So I want 16-year-olds to do it.
Yeah, but Errol, I'm 69 now, so you're a young whippersnapper compared to
You
me.
still got your whole life ahead of you,
I've
mate.
still got my whole life, and actually, it's because I think we know. I can't remember how many years we've known each other.
Well, I joined, it wouldn't be before 2011, and I joined Cardboard Citizens in 2011.
Well, that's where we first met.
Yeah, it was on Cardboard Citizens. It was round
Cardboard
about
Citizen.
that
That's when
time.
I first met you. And then
Mhm.
I saw this guy, we were doing these performance things. He did his poetry. I thought, he's bloody good. I don't like him.
There's something you said
Errol,
earlier. You said something about, oh, you can't write poetry. Let me tell you,
I
everybody
can't.
can. No,
No, I
no,
know
everybody
why.
can. I could say that about myself. I could literally say I can't write poetry. I listen to other people's poetry. I read other people's poetry, and I think mine isn't like that. But other people call my stuff poetry. You know what I mean? What you do is you splurge on. This is how you write poetry. Yeah, you get your pen, you get a bit of paper, and you write bloody English words until you fill it all up. Yeah. Then you look at it and think, oh, actually, I'm going to highlight that bit. I'm going to use that line. I'm going to use that line. Then you get your other bit of paper, and the lines you're going to use, you put it on your second bit of paper. By the third bit of paper, you got your poem.
Well, let me tell you why, and the audience can hear this.
Yeah.
The reason I put in poetry, I've always been acting since I was a kid, since 7 years old. I got some brilliant parts given to me in primary school. I
Mm.
remember I played Dr. Roylott, the villain in the Speckled Bandit, Sherlock Holmes thing. And I was 10. My teacher thought I was brilliant.
Mm.
He said to me, I'd like you to represent the school at a poetry reading competition. And it was The Raven by Poe.
Mm.
Now, in those days, I can't do this anymore. I look at a page of text and remember it straight away. There was no problem. I just look, that's it, put it away.
Mm.
I don't know how many times looked at that bloody poem. And the night of the poetry competition, I stood up, said my name, the name of the school, the title of the poem, and who it's by, and I went blank.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I have a block.
Yeah. So I had a very similar experience. So remember, I performed my show dozens of times, you know what I mean,
Mm,
over 30 times, or you know what I mean, 15 different organizations, and I had to perform it for the Royal Shakespeare Company because it got selected as one of the 37
mm,
plays. They invited me down to Stratford upon Avon, the birthplace of Shakespeare, to perform it. There weren't many people in the audience. There was about 8 people, maybe 12, you know what I mean? But I was there at Stratford and I started to do it. Now remember, I've done it from memory tons of times, but I hadn't picked it up for a month and I got complacent. I thought, I've got this. So even on the train, I was busy yapping instead of looking at my script.
yeah.
And I thought, oh, I've got this. And then I was about a quarter of the way through the play, and I suddenly realised I can't remember what come next. And the other problem was because I can improv, I know the
Mm,
story. So even if you haven't got the words down packed, I could, you know what I mean? I could usually fluff it, you know what I mean? I could improv it, I can make it work. I couldn't even do that. My mind went so totally blank, I had to run off the stage. I said to the audience, hold on a minute. I ran off the stage. I had to go to the dressing room, get my script, and come back and then looked at it to remind myself, you know what I
see,
mean? And then
when
carried on
it's your
doing it.
when it's
Hmm?
your own material, this is the final story because we got to be. After I'd done that first piece, I
Mhm.
was still going to go back to my job.
Yeah.
And on the Monday, this is a Sunday, on the Monday, that guy was going to run another workshop.
Yeah.
And I don't like doing the same piece. I wrote a piece that day. Probably one of the most bizarre comedy pieces I've ever written.
Mm.
Because the ending was the Queen driving a tank down Victoria Bridge.
Yeah. I can see her doing that.
Okay, well, she did it all the time. And I remember this is a workshop setting. There were about 25 people there. Everybody was laughing apart from one person. And as you put it, as a comedian, you can't let that go. So I went more bizarre and got her laughing.
Mm.
But when it's a learn piece, like if I do your play and I forgot it, I'd be
No.
mortified.
Yeah.
So I
I
one
sort of got
day,
over it. The RSC, you know what I mean? The Royal Shakespeare Company is a big deal. But, you know,
mm,
2 days later, I went down to Sheffield to do it. And I just went
it
through the
is
script
different.
when I was
It's
on the
like,
train. And then I was doing it. The fit was full. I'd done it. And I felt I was in the zone. You know what I mean? I just knew I couldn't go wrong. I just had the whole thing. You know what I mean? And it did make me think, oh, all I had to do before that time when I'd done it in Stratford, all I had to do was pick up the script for 20
yeah.
minutes and just go through it. Just to rejig
I
the
mean,
memory.
sometimes, like normally, what I have, if I'm doing a part, and when I did the hostel tour for Cardboard, I had 21 different parts to do.
Mm, bloody hell.
So each time, and I think my improvisation, when I did improv, that sort of thing, I might do 15 characters on a night.
Mhm.
But what I normally do is, in my mind, will be the key phrase for that character. And then I go into it. I
Yeah.
played a Polish man, so I learned Polish accent. They got a voice coach. And finally, one thing about Shakespeare companies you might laugh at. As we know, the founder of Cardboard is a guy called Adrian Jackson, who
Mhm.
I have great admiration for.
Yeah, so have I.
And he loves Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And he got the
I
voice
think he
coach,
I think he grew up in the same town or something like that.
probably
Yeah,
the same age.
yeah.
He's younger than me, I think. Um, and he got the voice coach in the Royal Shakespeare Company come along one evening and talk. I'm sitting there listening to her. And you know me, I'm not scared of asking questions of anybody.
Yeah.
I went up to her and said, "Why didn't you think about modernizing the language?" She was aghast.
What
But yeah,
modernizing the
bringing
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare into contemporary
Yeah,
language.
yeah. So some people have done that.
I was in a play where we did it
Mm,
before, but when I said it to her, it was like, "Oh no, this is
yeah.
eh,
Some people would see that as sacrilege, you know what I mean?
yeah."
But they do all sorts of things with Shakespeare plays nowadays, you know what I mean? They
Mm.
do
So
they do all sorts. They sometimes they set them in some tribe in Africa, you know what I mean? And they look at
yeah,
it totally different, you know? And it seems that there's something very transferable about the works of Shakespeare that they can apply
I
for lots of
I think
situations.
theatre is that I've done a film, a short film,
Mhm.
when you said about and there's nothing like a live. But you said about Zoom earlier on. There's nothing like a live audience.
Yeah. Oh yes, I thrive on the live. I
Yeah.
thrive on live audiences. I
So
much prefer it. You know what I mean? I can usually feel them. I can read them as I'm going
yeah,
along,
well,
especially if
it's
I'm
the
doing
energy, isn't it?
yeah. It was a
So
good challenge for myself because as I said, I've been doing the spoken word since 2011. I performed all over the place. You know what I mean? And then I had to do my show. So I was doing that instead. So rather than 3 minute, 2, 3 minute poems on the stage, I was on the stage for an hour. And I say an hour, but really it's like it goes over. It's like an hour, 5 minutes or so, an hour, 7 minutes.
it was an hour and
I
10 minutes
mean,
last time.
doing this thing and doing the same material all the time and all the rest of it, you know what I mean? And yeah, it is a challenge. You want people to laugh at the bits where you think are funny. When they don't, you think, oh gosh, why didn't they laugh? And then you say to yourself, okay, so I performed it last night. They all kind of got it, but then I performed it the next night and they didn't seem to get it. And what was
I've
the,
had
you
that.
know?
I'll tell you a
Yeah.
story
And a
later
lot of
on.
the time,
But
it's all to do with the energy. It's to do with what people. Sometimes it's to do with the time of day that you're performing, whether
yeah,
people had a drink first. You know what I mean? All
it's
kinds.
also the audience. But Errol,
Mm.
thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you for having me.
And I hope you come at some stage in the future when you're a famous star.
When I'm a famous playwright and that, you know what I mean? I'll
Yeah,
come back and I'll say yes.
Ernie Wise said, "Well, play what I wrote." But thank you. And remember one thing, ladies and gentlemen, I've seen his play. It is excellent. And he's a brilliant performer. If
Thank
you
you.
are interested, I will put the word on the curb at gmail.com, which you forgot.
Word on the curb, UK.
You
Curb
can,
spelt like the Australians spell it. They spell
yeah.
it KERB.
Okay.
Word on the curb, UK. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
goodbye. If you've enjoyed that, maybe you might consider coming on, sharing your story. But if not, maybe you might consider joining my mailing list. There is no charge. You get notification every single broadcast that goes out, plus the monthly newsletter, and you hear little snippets from me along the way. So if you are interested, email me at standupspeakoutuk@mail.com. Thank you. Bye.